through my exploration and my want to figure out, I had something I wanted to figure out. So here now is me. I'm an artist here at Magnolia Art Exchange. I've been here for about 9 months. I work at Arts and Health Ocala Metro, which turns out, as you'll kind of see as I go through my story, is pretty perfectly aligned with my life and like what I'm doing. So anyway, I guess I'm just gonna start telling you my story. So I moved to Florida about 4.5 years ago, and I had come from California where my life was quite hectic, and I had gotten divorced and had many a rough year of getting by, and suffering from depression and just generally not being a very happy person. I was focused on raising my kids and doing what I had to do to get to their adulthood. Now I knew once they got to adulthood, I was going to move closer to my parents. And when I first decided that, they lived in Hawaii. But during those years of them growing up, they retired to Florida, so here I am. So I arrived here in late 2019, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but I got here, and I was just kind of taking a little rest over the holidays and getting settled. And during that time, I met Seth Menzel, who you guys all know, who owns 8th Gallery, and he introduced me into abstract art. And it was like it opened up this whole kind of intriguing world to me. But anyway, that wasn't to be long because I got a job down in Tampa, so I moved down there. And I got a job actually at an art gallery, which is completely out of my field, but it was interesting. But about a month and a half into that, the pandemic hit. So that led me to start painting. And it was really good for me. So it was something I never really attempted in the past because I'm a perfectionist, and I always thought if I painted something, it had to look like something. So if it didn't look like that, I would be disappointed, and I knew it would never look like that, so I just never even tried. So discovering abstract art, it really did open me up to something that was more about the process and just letting things be what they're going to be. So that started happening. I started messing around with it, not too much, just kind of here and there. But eventually I did finish my first painting. I'm going to show it to you guys. It's not very good, but it was the first one I actually felt like I finished. And this is it. You guys can probably see Seth's influence there in the style of it. But anyway, that's what that was. And after messing around for a while with that, I had a previous cross-stitching phase. So I had a bunch of thread from that, and I decided, I thought, well, this might be kind of cool to like add some thread to the canvas. So I tried that. And this is kind of where my like exploratory style, I think, was born. So this was kind of what that looked like, and like, the paintings aren't great, but again, it was more about finding something for me that I was able to like distract myself with, and I guess find sort of peace with just being with myself, which I think we all found during the pandemic. But I was in a new town, I didn't know anybody, so what was I gonna do? So, as I was kind of diving into that, I started learning a little bit more about art. I started looking around at different styles and different things, and I decided I would like to try watercolors. So for some odd reason, instead of going to watercolor on paper, I started painting on fabric. Because along with the cross stitching, I had a bunch of these hoops. So I started painting on the hoops, and I started doing this kind of thing, and I didn't really show it to anybody but my family and some friends, but people were like, oh, those are great, that looks cool. So the encouragement that I got along the way and how good it made me feel while I was doing it made me keep going. So I just kind of kept going. And this is kind of over the span of, I don't know, 1.5 years, 2 years, so it's not like that all happened overnight. It was gradual. There was a lot of really bad, terrible paintings in the interim. And some of the first watercolors that I did on paper were just like, I can look at it and be like, oh, my mind was a mess. You know, it was just like, it was a lot of scribbling with like the pencils, the color pencils, and it was just, you know, all over the place. But anyway, so that process with the fabric led me to move on to the paper, where I started doing the sort of little abstract paintings and then adding the thread work there. And when I got here, I started feeling like I sort of had something special. Like, I mean, they just were really neat, they were unique, and whenever I showed them to people that I knew, they were like, these are really great. So anyway, it was kind of right there when I decided to move back to Ocala, and this was 2 years ago in June. And I came back up here and I moved back in with my parents, and I started coming downtown, and I got reacquainted with some people that I had met, you know, 2 years before, or 2.5 years before, and started going to NCA and just, you know, just kind of getting into the community. And what I found was lots of lovely people and everybody encouraging me to just dive in and go for it. And with that, and with the support too of my parents, that's what I did. So, let's see. Oh, I kind of skipped over this part. Here I am. Anyway, so when it really started was when I got my studio at 8th Gallery. So this was in December of 2022, right? No, yeah, 22. I can't keep track. I found out I was an extra year older than I thought. Anyway, I got the studio there, so this was great for me because once I was at home living with my parents, I had a little extra room in our house, but they keep it really neat. And they didn't really like me dragging stuff back and forth and, you know, having papers everywhere. So it was really pivotal for me to get a space where I could have all my supplies out the ready. I could leave things laying around drying. I could really just do what I wanted to do. And I spent about 9 good months really just exploring and learning and kind of getting involved in the community and just embracing this whole thing that was happening. So I played a lot with the watercolors, and I, at some point, became really intrigued by this, what I was seeing online was atmospheric watercolors. And these were these just fuzzy, beautiful watercolors, but I had no idea how they were made, and I had no idea how to accomplish this. But I got it set in my mind that this was something I was going to figure out. So that's what I did. And that's what you see over there is the fruits of my labor is these types of paintings. So I do want to tell you guys a little bit about that. So I'm going to go back here where some of my watercolors are. So when I first started playing around with the watercolors, I had your typical like tubes of watercolors, I had the pan watercolors, and somewhere along the line I learned about liquid watercolors, and I was like, ooh, what are those? So I poked around. I first went to Michael's and I picked up these ones, and then I ordered some of these, and I didn't know that, I know the difference now, but back then I didn't know what, I knew they were different, but I didn't know how. And I would come to discover there's just like a million different kinds of every single supply. Like, not a million, but you know, there's so many different types of paper, there's so many different types of brushes and pigments, and I mean, just everything you can imagine. So I just kind of dove in and I started getting to know all these supplies. I wanted to figure out how they would work. I wanted to get predictable results. Every once in a while I'd make something that was like, wow. And I'd be like, how did I do that? How can I replicate that? So I made it sort of a mission to like figure all this stuff out. So that's what I started doing. So at first I was just using regular watercolor paper, and I was mostly using these watercolors. And these are dye-based watercolors. So the consistency is basically like water. They don't have any pigments in them. And later I learned they're not really that light fast, but they are really whenever we use them. But I would use these, and you could put two on the paper and they would just mix together and kind of get muddy because they're the same consistency. So somewhere along the line, I think I mixed this watercolor and this watercolor together, and I was like, oh, that's different. I didn't know why, but this is a pigment-based watercolor, so it has a little bit thicker consistency and it has some granulation to it, which I think is more interesting. But anyway, and then, you know, I started learning, and I came across these high-flow acrylics. And I thought, well, that could be cool because we get transparent and we get something a little bit more opaque. And when I mixed these together, it was like magic. With the caveat of the paper that I was using. So I was using the watercolor paper, and my process, if you've seen it, I think all of you have probably seen it online. I work very wet, and one of the problems with watercolor paper is that it buckles and it warps. So even with taping it down, as wet as I was working, it would buckle and it would pool, and I didn't know what to do with that. So I started doing some research on paper, just like everything else. I mean, I'm like a mad scientist. I want to figure it out. So I started poking around with different papers. I tried hot press paper, cold press paper, and I came across somebody using the mineral paper online and people using synthetic paper. So I ordered some synthetic paper, which is basically like a yellow paper, and it's made of polyethylene. It's plastic. It's very smooth, and things just flow all over it. In fact, in that picture, I'm using a big piece of it, and I was using like tube watercolor, and I was using a palette knife and just smooshing the colors around. And it's fun, but if you mess up, you can also just like wash it off. So it's a different kind of paper. The mineral paper, when I got it, I was like, there is no way that this paper is going to handle what I do. Like, no way. Like, it's super thin. It's like practically see-through. But what I learned was that it also has like a bit of a plastic component to it. So it's made of calcium carbonate, which is like what you find in shells and stones. It's also called stone paper. And it has a little bit of tooth to it. It feels kind of like an eggshell. I guess you can feel it bigger if you want to. And this paper is great because I found that when I laid the pigments on there, they would sort of sit on top instead of soak right in, and I could manipulate them a lot easier. They would move around, but they also eventually they would slowly seep in, and then with some really interesting textures, and I just really liked it. So I was like, I found my thing. So that's sort of how the materials evolved. So these are just some pictures of me playing around. So in here I'm using something called Brusho crystals, and these were these magical crystal watercolor things that I found that they're like, it's almost like a soft granule, and you can like shape them out onto just a wet paper, and they just bloom. They're like multi-mixed colors. They're just really beautiful, and you can also mix them into paints. You can do all sorts of things with them. But that was me just kind of playing with it, mixed with one of the, I think I had gray on that one. And then the other was just a picture of me during one of my processes. And, oh yeah, a little behind on the side. So this is me experimenting some more. So on that right hand, or on that far side is like playing with salt. I've used all sorts of different things mixed into the paint, like salt, even dirt, vinegar, ammonia, just trying to find out like what it does. Like, I'm just fascinated by the reactions that happen. And I think that's one thing I really love about the watercolors is like how unpredictable they are. So anyway, so I got kind of to there. This was, I guess, late spring, last summer, or early summer, and I decided that I wanted to apply to FAFO as an emerging artist. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make these paintings. I'm going to get them right, I'm going to make a bunch of them, and people are going to love them, and I'm just going to sell a million paintings. It's going to be great. But I had a long way to go, and I knew it. So at that time, I thought, you know what? This process is really kind of cool, and I think I'm going to start documenting it. So I started recording my process, and I started posting on Instagram and Facebook with reels. And people, you hear about people doing the 30 reels in 30 days or whatever, and really gonna make your stuff explode. Well, that did happen. That actually happened for me. So I didn't do 30 reels in 30 days, but I maybe did like 15. And really quickly, people were super interested in the process, and they were intrigued by it. They asked me a lot of questions, and it was just so weird because it just happened so quickly, and I just couldn't believe how interested people were. And pretty soon, people started wanting to buy things, and I ended up making a website and getting all that going. So, but about this same time, I started suffering from some really bad allergies. I did not know what they were at the time, and I was suffering is putting it lightly. I was very miserable. I was having like all over body itching. I could not sleep. I couldn't focus. I just was having it was terrible, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. So it was about 8 months of figuring that out. You probably can't read that, but this is just a short list. Well, it's a long list of things that I'm allergic to from just one of the 6 chemicals that they found that I was allergic to. So it took about 8 months to figure it out, and I have been detoxing for another 8 months now. I think, yeah, it's coming up on 8 months, maybe 9. I'm feeling a lot better now, but one thing that does kind of tie into now that I'm working in arts and health, I'm aware of the arts and healing. I can tell you all that during this time, painting was really kind of a lifesaver for me. It was something that could take my mind off of my anxieties about what was going on with my body, and that, combined with when I really felt terrible and didn't want to leave the house, I could engage with people on Instagram because people were asking me a ton of questions, and I had the time, and I was able to answer things, and I think that helped grow that there. But yeah, that's kind of it there. Anyway, so thankfully I'm feeling a lot better. But before I get into the weeds, I want to give you guys a demonstration so I can talk you through like the combination of the mediums I use and like how I put them down and everything, because that process has really evolved. When I first started doing it, it was just like a line, some drops of paint, and then water. Like I just like really had no idea. And it's amazing to me because I know like it looks really easy, and I get a lot of people that will tell me like, oh, I tried that, my painting looks just terrible, and you gotta play with it, you gotta learn, and it's just like everything else, it's kind of trial and error, and I'm sure it's different for everybody. So I am going to turn this on. So the video.
Great when electronics work.
It really is. It really is. I'm working on starting a YouTube channel too, so this is a really good test run with the camera because I don't think I'm gonna be doing that with my phone. I think we're doing it with the camera. So I am trying I want to get some like longer tutorial style videos because I just love sharing this process, and I get so much joy from it. I love sharing it with people. The amount of struggle it took me to get where I am is not for the faint of heart. And if I can help other people, get a little head start on it, and also express to them like how you do have to sort of learn more. It's not like people are like, oh, how much of this, how much of that. It is not that. Like I know which ones of these work together. I know how thick they are, how thin they are, how globby they are, how granular they are, but it's just because I've spent hours and hours and hours. So, anyway, typically, are you recording? Oh, I guess not. And the most important thing is that you guys can see it. I don't you want it. Thank you, I appreciate that. It's not critical. Well, it's a better view. Will that stuff go away? talked about is inspiration, and I guess I kind of forgot about that part. For me, I do get inspired by lots of different things. I mean, a lot of times it's just my world around me, the things that are going on. A lot of times I can look back at paintings I've made and I can remember the mood I was in or how I was feeling that day. So sometimes it's just like emotions are coming out. Sometimes it's like I went to the symphony and I heard some wonderful music and that's coming out. Sometimes something really good happened and that's coming out. So it's all those things and more. And I also too get inspired from within my own paintings. Sometimes something will happen in there and I'm like, ooh, I gotta dive deeper into that. So anyway, I'm gonna get started. So I usually do start still with these little liquid watercolors. So I usually use this as my kind of baseline to make my first little, I guess it's like a horizon line. So, and I love working on this mat because it has these grids on here, so I can kind of have a guide from side to side. Because left to my own devices really workable. So I just kind of usually just sort of scribble across. Twice. And then, if I want to use any other liquid watercolor, I'm going to do that next. So, this is Dr. P.H. Martin's. This is the Hydrus watercolors. These are excellent. They're pigment-based. They granulate. They are so cool. I just started using these and they're awesome. I know, like,
Andy Warhol used, did you say Dr. Martin? That's what you want.
It's good stuff. I have used their inks for a while, but I hadn't used these watercolors before. They're marvelous. They should hire me. So I just take a couple drops. And like I said, when I first was doing this, my drops were completely random. I sort of learned, I kind of made them a little more purposeful. And then I'm going to add some high flow acrylic, which comes usually next. And for these, if I have these, I like to start with a darker one with lighter. Sometimes I'll use 1, 2, maybe even 3. So that color I first used there was a blue, and I used a violet. This is aqua. This was one of the first colors in this. I can't think of something left. This one is Titan Violet Pale, and it's like a lot thicker than that. And this is Bombay ink, also by Dr. P.H. Martin. And I love the white. I have lots of colors. The colors goes a really long way. I also have some other pen ink that I really like. They're beautiful colors, but they are not like fast at all. They fade really bad. So while they're fun to play with, they're probably not good for long lasting art. But anyway, I love the white. Just adds a little something. So that. This is the first time I've ever explained this process to people, so I hope I'm doing all right.
Doing great.
So then, what happens with the painting is that I get it wet above and below, and then when I have the wet brush hits these pigments and connects with the wet area, it just bleeds are you tilting the paper, like, and I don't always show, you know, that it's wet beforehand, because, I mean, this is the key part that people want to see is the paper. So anyway, so usually my videos start after I do this, although I occasionally make one showing what I, anyway, go back and forth. And I used to run it all the way up to the edge of the paper, but I kind of learned that leaves, that was a lot of progress. Go about 2/3 of the way up. Try and be careful. It's just gonna be a lot. I dripped. All right. And sometimes I start in the middle, sometimes I start on the side. There's really no rhyme or reason. It's just kind of how I'm feeling. Let's start over here.
That's so satisfying. That's why she has how many?
I passed 100,000 yesterday.
Yay!
That's all. That's pretty wild.
Sorry if I spoiled that reveal, but I didn't.
So that's why there's champagne in that fridge.
Heck yeah. So that's how that goes.
How long does it take for them to dry?
So I did, yeah, they usually take, I don't know, around an hour to dry. So this is also something that people on Instagram don't really see, but if you saw me at couch sessions, you probably noticed that I work with the pipette a lot. So I'm gonna draw some of this liquid off. This table also is not as flat as I would like, so I'm not sure where the paints are gonna go. But if I left all this liquid on here, it would take longer to dry.
It changes the shape of
It does. You can use it to like pull the pigments in different directions, and it's
And do you intentionally do that ever?
sometimes, yeah. Especially when I do the circles. Because it's so contained within that space, it's kind of cool to be able to like pull it in a certain direction and pull it in another direction. I probably will just end up kind of leaving this. Might not be the greatest when it dries, but anyway, typically I'll spend a little time drawing some of this liquid off. It's also pretty important to me to have a pretty flat table, so I keep a level in there. But yeah, the paper is really interesting. It's I don't know, it's just the coolest stuff. It's probably like my most asked question too on Instagram. People are like, that paper, how come it's not bubbling? So that paper company should really let their sales pick up. So anyway, that's that. Do you guys have any other questions about that process?
Yeah, what happens if you use carbonated water, like before instead of that? Will it be bubbles?
No.
Just open a whole can of worms.
So I'm actually doing a lesson later next week for some kids that won an art show that I judged at. I gave away a lesson to the winner. And it's this little boy that actually I had given another lesson to last year. And he sold the painting at this art fair that he made with me last year. But I have some fun things planned, but we might have to try this soda water. We have to get something like that. So, turn this off.
So are all these materials available locally? have to order, don't you?
I do, so I've never seen the mineral paper in a store, and I always order it online. I do not order it from Amazon because it always comes damaged because they send it in a plastic bag. So I usually order it from Blick or Jerry's Artorama. The Ecoline watercolors, the dye-based ones, I haven't seen those in the store around here, so I order those. The high flow acrylics though are available at Michael's, and some of the watercolors that are acrylic inks are available. If you want to try it, I'm happy to come on over and try it. Go spending a bunch of money on supplies if you don't think you're gonna like it. Yeah. So it's very fun.
Yes, I have one of yours that I think it's like 2 or 3 rectangles.
Yes.
On the page. How do you keep those from like running into each other when you're doing multiple shapes on one page? Because they don't run into each other.
They don't.
So
So-
they do so much.
It just doesn't go where it's not.
It gets dry, yeah.
Yeah.
So use that as a dry.
Yeah. They just stay contained, which is nice. So I'm gonna move on to these weeds. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about these weeds that are part of my current show, and then we'll wrap that. I'm paying no attention to that 100,000 followers. I'm right around that. It's just crazy. And upsetting. So back in January, I was asked if I wanted to do a show here, if I'd be ready for a solo show in the summer, and I said, yes, I'm gonna go for it. So I immediately walked into my studio and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, what am I gonna put on these walls? Because most of my paintings are pretty small, and I was like, I just can't take 1 million paintings, and I was like, everybody's seen those, like, I need to like do something more, something different. So I started kind of, I was looking around, I started playing some different stuff. I had played with some collaging. I had cut up like some paintings. So this was like one that I did back when I worked at ESAB. And these are actually glued on here as well as stitched on for decoration. I never finished, the needle is still back there. I think I was gonna add to it, but I never did. So anyway, so I did stuff like that, but I can't use Mod Podge really anymore because I'm allergic to it. So I was like, what else could I do? So I started cutting some strips, and I played around with like kind of ribboning it, and then I did some things where I like put stitches on here, and then I put pieces like curled through there. And one day I was like, I'm gonna try to weave these together, and I cut one up, sliced one up, and I wove it together, and I was like, look at this. Oh guys, isn't this awesome? And I was just like, this is it. This is what I'm gonna do. And I was looking around, and I was like, I have all these scrap pieces of paper. I have all these like just junked paintings, things that I thought were just. I guess I didn't really think they were trash because I held on to them for some reason. I can't throw any paper away. But I started weaving them together, and it was a very different kind of process because while this is quite quick, that was something that was more kind of meditative, and it gave me a lot of time to think about what I was doing and what these paintings meant to me. And I really developed this whole kind of theory around why I really liked it. And I think part of it was that when I sliced these paintings up and reimagined them, it was like a transformation, which is like something myself, I've undergone while making these paintings, so I like that. But I also liked that they were sort of the building blocks of where I am, So they're really like pieces of me in there. So I just really like them. Anyway, so I started weaving them together, and at first I was doing like a little small, like that red one there and that blue one on the wall, like real thin pieces. Most of them were little bits of a smaller piece of paper. And I started getting this big stack, and I was like, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna mount these? What am I gonna do with them? So I was playing around with, putting them, like stitching them on paper, and then I was gonna frame them, but I was like, just over frames. I do not want to buy any more frames. They're so expensive, they're heavy, they're hard to store, so I was like, well, I'm just gonna keep making them. I kept building them, and I was getting this, I was using up 1 million binder clips because I couldn't use any tape, so I'll have this, craft paper with like stuff just clipped on there and woven together. started wanting to do different kind of patterns and things like that, and, you know, different widths, different stuff, so I still have a bunch of ideas of different things I wanna do with them, so we'll see where it goes from here, but, anyway, but I really do enjoy that they have that sort of theme of transformation, and I love taking something that I thought was, you know, garbage and making it into something new, something that people can appreciate, so. That's kind of where I'm at, and that's me leaving one of those really small ones. I learned real quick, that is a huge bumper. Oh, I learned real quick after I started mounting them that so good at until now. So it took forever. And it depended on the paper too, because some of them are with synthetic paper, which is more stiff. Some are with watercolor paper, which is also more stiff. And some are with that mineral paper, which y'all saw is pretty flimsy. So this one here is 2 big pieces of mineral paper it's 1 big piece of mineral paper and 1 piece of watercolor paper. So the red one was watercolor paper, so it was stiffer. So I used that one to be the one that would go across. But it took a while. And this was before I had decided what I was gonna do with them and how I was gonna mount them, so there was no measuring, and I didn't have a cutting surface to be able to, like, you know, use a knife to do this, like X-Acto knives, so these were hand cut with scissors, so they're a little imperfect, but I mean, I think that's part of the beauty of them too, is that it's you know, handmade. But I pretty quickly abandoned these skinny strips after I mounted 2 of them, because at that time I didn't have an electric staple gun, and it was like, you know, 52. And this was so 52. So I did end up getting an electric stapler, which was really nice. But yeah, those were took me a while. So anyway, I thank you all for coming to hear my story, and we'll see what I don't really know. I don't know what is next. I don't know what is next. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do next, but I can guarantee you it's probably something you haven't seen me do before, so I don't know, you may have seen it somewhere.